DmC Devil May Cry is the controversial reboot Devil May Cry franchise developed by Ninja Theory and published by Capcom. The original release came out in 2013, with this video specifically being about the Definitive Edition that came out 2 years after in 2015, but only released on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One for some reason. Like, why didn't they put this on PC? Especially since I believe this game got announced also with Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition, which did also get a PC version despite the original already being on PC. I don't get it. This game had an uphill battle from the start, just from the idea of rebooting a franchise that was already doing great with Devil May Cry 4 being the last entry release and being a very well-liked title, even if nowadays people will highlight, it's unfinished, it's unfinished. Yeah, I get it. I still like Devil May Cry 4, so I like it a lot. So it was a weird decision, but also during the era where Capcom wanted to have Western developers try to spin out their franchises. But the uphill battle wasn't just that, it's also because the fans, like fan base being, were incredibly hostile and toxic towards the developers, who decided to bite back as well, which, you know, if the people who were like, maybe I'll give it a chance, weren't already like that, seeing the developers bite back and be just as venomous as the awful section of fan base, turns people who go, oh, maybe I'll try this too, you know what, never mind, I'm good. Which I was honestly part of that faction, you know what, maybe I'll try, oh, never mind, these guys are dicks. So the main premise is that demons effectively run the planet, using every native aspect of humanity to pretty much have full control, with Demon King Mundus being the one fully in charge, and going after Dante, feeling that him being the son of Sparda would essentially be a threat to his plans. But Dante gets recruited by the Order, who essentially are a big resistance group trying to foil Mundus' plans. So, kind of inadvertently cause your own downfall in a sense. Right off the bat, I do like to immediately highlight how the demons are watching Dante through his day-to-day activity, or in this case, nightly activity of going to the club and everything. So that's the aspect that they truly have their eye and pretty much have full control over everything. Although if they have this good surveillance, how they not found this dude earlier, let alone why did he wait hours later, considering it was night when he got back to his trailer, and they pretty much attack him around day or so. So weird choices in those aspects, but either way, I do like the emphasis on the control the demons have, even if every single aspect when it comes to the demons ruining the planet is purposely designed to be not subtle, down to the fact that you, the player, can even see the other signal they're sending off with their messaging and all the stuff they're doing. I will note that this remaster does add, I believe, a few cutscenes to the story in order to try and flesh out some aspects that were, I won't say weren't fleshed out, but more so could have used a bit more considering some of the scenes happen. Although the change to the game's ending, more so the final shot of it, is a very weird decision. But I will say you generally got the characters original. I wouldn't say this remaster with some of the new scenes will really change your mind. But overall, I still think the story is alright. Like, it's not anything truly bad. It's just more things I wish they focused on. Like, if the Order is doing this for humanity, including Dante, I wish the game emphasized more the, well, human aspect of this whole entire thing. Like, early on, they do have some moments, like cutting back between Limbo, which is the whole demon space where demons have full control and constantly pull Dante into, where you see, like, oh, here's what this factory making this energy drink actually looks like, and then it cuts back to what the humans are doing and what they're seeing, everything. I do like that aspect, but I wish the game had more of it, because for a game about trying to help free humanity, they don't exactly focus on humanity much at all. Not helped by, in this version of Devil May Cry, Dante is a Nephilim. He is part demon, part angel, so there's no human aspect necessarily to him in this, so the human aspect is pretty much to be carried by a cat. And honestly, while Cat is a decent enough character, it's more the fact that when it comes to seeing humanity struggle and how there are people who basically don't believe what's going on, or at least see them react to things, like there's stuff Dante does here that is so in public and devastating that I'm surprised they don't cut to how the public views him. They only instead show you the demons basically, you know, trying to deface his name and reputation, which he doesn't really care about. But I wish they had more of the human aspect in their response to some of the stuff going on that Dante is doing, considering he's causing mass destruction. I will say the biggest downside when it comes to this game's writing, it's just the fact that it feels like a whole lot of missed opportunities. Like I mentioned the thing with the human aspect not being focused enough, but even just like character dialogue feels like they had the option to do something better, but chose the worst route. Like, for example, one early boss for the Succubus, who was a cool concept of, oh, Succubus, where essentially the toxins and stuff she produces is what basically manipulates people, not the sense of she's a big seductress herself. And the dialogue for the fight isn't much at all, and feel like for a character, for this version of Dante, who's way more talkative, you think they do more with the back and forth banter between him and the bosses, but it's generally not really anything that you can really manage to figure out, like a whole lot of F-bombs, stuff like that. Like, I wish there was more to it. Like, one scene I always focus on when it comes to how this game's written is this one scene where Dante goes to a nightclub. He gets stopped by a bouncer. Bouncer's name on the list. Dante punches out the bouncer, writes something, and says, "I am now." The joke that should be done there is that Dante actually writes his name. Instead, he just writes F you on the board, which, once again, it feels like it's a good opportunity for a joke here, but instead they go with this route that honestly falls flat for me, and I know humor is very subjective. There is also one scene early in this game that always gets so much hate, and honestly, I can't blame them, because when the dev team were being hostile, I guess it would make sense to be worried and feel like anything in the game potentially could be used as them being a big middle finger to the fan base. But there's one scene early on where Dante says,
"Not in a million years."
Where people hate that line entirely, I feel like it's giant middle finger, but honestly it was just more or less a case of foreshadowing future events, everything. So it feels weird it gets singled out. I understand why it's singled out, but it's a case of developers may not necessarily have been trying to be hostile in that scene, and more so they had an idea, but because of, you know, the hostility before the game came out, people will take anything in the game as one massive pretty much attempt to just make people be angry. Now for the gameplay, being an action title, but this remaster does make some changes. Just in the original version, there was no lock-on button. Instead, it only had an auto lock-on, which honestly, when I played the original, I thought was fine. The issue wasn't the lock-on, the issue was more so the camera would keep swaying and then pretty much get pushed up against the wall and start giving me bad camera angles, which having a lock-on button does help refocus it, which is a lot better, but then comes the awkwardness of adding a lock-on button to a game that didn't actually have one. Like, I do like the fact that you add a setting to where you can change how the input for the move stingers perform, whether it be the OG versions of double tap forward and then the sword button, or instead it's hold lock on, hold forward, and the sword button, which is akin to the main Devil May Cry games, which is a cool addition, but it only affects that move and nothing else. And there's also the aspect that when it came to having two dodge buttons in the OG version of this game, that was because to hold the back buttons, which would be L2 and R2, in order for Angel and Demon form respectively. So needing two dodge buttons is because trying to hold R2, then needing to tap, like, let's say R1 for example, would be awkward. Well, in this case, R1 is the lock-on button. But get the idea, it'd be awkward. So they end up creating a scenario, trying to avoid that, by having two dodge buttons. But here, they create a scenario where now R1's lock on and L1's only dodge button, meaning if I'm holding Angel form, I have to pretty much try and hold Angel form with my middle finger and then use my index finger to have on L1 when I need to dodge, which can feel a bit awkward as a result. Same with using Demon form with R2, and I need to hold R1 for lock on in order to focus the camera. So it's aspect like that it's a kind of the aspect of, you know, adding something after the fact and not really fully mesh with your control scheme. So there is that addition to the remaster that feels a bit awkward. Although you can toggle the lock on to be instead a toggle button where you need to tap it once, but that also feels weird to me when it comes to playing Devil May Cry, just tap your lock on. So the main mechanics when it comes to this version of Devil May Cry is the fact that you have your guns, you have your melee attack, but like I mentioned earlier, Angel and Demon form, which switches out to your Angel and Demon weapon respectively, with the Angel weapons always being weapons that attack faster and can be good for crowd control and juggling, but don't do much damage. The Demon weapons are always obviously slower weapons, but will deal more damage. And the guns trying the guns, and I feel like Ebony and Ivory are the only one actually worth using. So there's an aspect where you can pretty much switch on the fly in that sense by holding the button, which is super cool and convenient, and I honestly prefer this method of weapon swapping compared to the DmC 4 and 5, where you have to just switch the entire weapon entirely off your main weapon rebellion. It just feels weird to me. So here, being snappy is cool, but with the changes I mentioned, having lock on and dodge, can feel awkward trying to avoid attacks, but my fingers are not placed correctly to be prepared for that. On top of the fact that you still have the Angel Evade and Demon Evade, which, if you dodge while holding this button, you get a temporary buff, which once again is a cool reward for doing that, but with the changes to how dodges work, can be a bit more awkward this time around. Another gimmick added to the game is the red and blue enemies that got so much hate in the original, because in the original, your attacks would bounce off if you're not using a proper Angel Demon weapon. Here, your attacks don't bounce off. The enemies won't stagger, but you do have the ability to pretty much deal damage with them, which also helps with making more stylish combos, which is a cool incentive, although for me it kind of highlights how in the original, the enemies is much of a problem, mostly because there are certain weapons you get where you can pretty much leave enemies at such high stun lock that having them be on the field made them a non-factor as a result. So there's that kind of aspect. But one thing I do really like about this game is the fact that enemies can harm each other. Yeah, like some enemies do have attacks that if they collide with an enemy will deal damage or flat out kill them, which is super cool. And these red and blue enemies are a big factor because one won't try to do this powerful attack but can hit another demon, or the angel ones, the blue ones, can do this ice attack that can freeze their allies. So you can take advantage of the enemy's own attacks and use them against each other, which is freaking cool addition to this game, and I actually really like that whole entire aspect. An aspect I don't like is the double trigger in this game. Not necessarily the form, although it is kind of an design. It's more the fact that it sends enemies flying into the air, which does not feel comfortable because when the enemies get to an air, I'll do an air combo. I know it's done to pretty much have enemies essentially not fight back, which can be useful against certain enemies we not like, and just leave them vulnerable and easy pickings. But it's the fact that once they're in the air, I'm just going to immediately pull them back down to the ground because it's way easier to handle them with a ground combo that transition into an air combo than for me to start with an air combo and then knock them back down to the ground. You do also have platforming, and this game easily has the best platforming in the entire Devil May Cry franchise by proxy of actually focusing on it. Because you have abilities such as the Angel Pull, which allows you to pull Dante towards certain blue objects. You have the Demon Pull, which allows you to pull things out to make more platforms. You also have Angel Boost, which you will constantly be spamming because it's the fastest form of movement in this game. The fact that it didn't add a sprint ability like Devil May Cry 4 had, and then special edition for that game, and making a sprint feature pop like after a few seconds of running, I'm surprised they didn't add that aspect to this game. I guess there's not much idle walking around in this game compared to that one, but it's still weird. An Angel Boost, sometimes it can benefit your platforming with Angel Pull, Demon Pull. Sometimes it negates the entire point of even having Angel Pull, Demon Pull because of how much distance it gets, especially if you hold a button and Dante stays in the air longer. So it's a weird addition, especially the mission where you get it. The entire mission just revolves around gaining the ability to go over one gap, which is very funny because on replay, it means you can just immediately jump over the gap and finish the mission. So there is that aspect, but it is a way to go move to get faster, and does give you another tool to get out of the way of attacks while in the air. And honestly, it makes me highlight how this version of Dante, who does not have the style feature that DmC 4 and 5 or 3, is so versatile and amazing to control. Like, you can do combos with Rebellion, switch to another weapon immediately and do combos with that one, up to the other one and do other combos. Even one weapon you can throw out, and while it's out in the play, harm your enemy, you can then swap it to the other angel weapon and start using that one while the other one's still in play, which is freaking cool. Like, the versatility of this Dante is freaking amazing when it comes to combat. That stuff you can do. Use Angel Boost, like I said, in combat to avoid attacks. You can still do an air dodge. you have so many ways of fighting enemies, and it just feels great to play when you're fighting regular enemies. There are some mobs I don't like who are more on the heavyset mobs that don't really take stagger whatsoever, but overall the enemies are fun to go against, especially since each demon arm you can quickly snap to have their own full weapon combo. So it is cool, even to the point where the loading screens will actually show you combos that you can pull off in the game after you unlock certain abilities and weapons, which is freaking cool. The developers giving you tips and tricks via the loading screens of all things, which is a cool reason loading screens. I love it. I approve. Now, what I don't care for is the boss battles, because despite how amazing and mobile I mentioned Dante is in the game, the boss fights feel like they're in their own different dimension, where it feels like it basically robs you of being able to do any of the stuff I mentioned. There are some bosses where they'll just have a big weak point they can try and target or force them to open up to deal bonus damage, but other times it feels like even with full arsenal, some attacks where trying to hit the weak point just won't for some reason, or it's a boss that's designed to get away as far as possible as a playing field, so most of your moveset won't work as a result because it's temporary out of play, and there's just stuff like that I just don't like. Or there are some bosses who you effectively can't hurt until you basically do a thing to stun them, and they can actually wail on them, but by doing so, it's just pretty much doing that, it basically means that I'm not really doing much in the fight until I can actually allow to hit the boss, and once I do, when I'm not doing much because the boss is no longer fighting back, they're in a stun state, and I'm just wailing on them, which is not exactly fun to do, especially with how great this combat is. It's great combat. This combat's great when it comes to back and forth stuff, but with boss fights like that, it feels pretty eh. The final boss is a bit better than the rest, but it still sucks for the reason that sucks. So it's real for the fact that it has so many small cutscenes that interrupt the fight, and you quickly realize the final boss doesn't really have much to their moveset at all. And honestly, compared to the other enemies, they're probably the second most pathetic threat to you in terms of actually being able to take you down. Not the worst boss fight in the game, like I said, they are more entertaining, but it feels weird that this boss should be more climactic, should have more to it, yet I can pretty much just see how limited their moveset actually is and how they basically can't do much to me as a result, and just feels weird that that's a final boss. And while that's for the main campaign, we have the DLC to go over, which was originally a pre-order bonus of all things, which is insane to me considering how much content you get in the DLC, but the DLC is titled Vergil's Downfall, and this entire DLC, I won't say much story-wise, but it does leave off some potential stuff that sets up, but more fact that when it comes to DLC, gameplay-wise, you have an entire new character to play as, and an entire new moveset. And while their moveset is good, the main problem with this DLC is that it feels like they had one moveset made and then had to break it up into 3 to separate it between angel form, neutral, and demon form, because it feels like stuff that should just be part of one form isn't. It just feels weird having to swap between, like for Dante, swap between weapons, swap between entire moveset, and that feels good and awesome. Here, swap between moveset feels like I'm playing with a fraction of a moveset per form, and I'm swapping to pretty much try to get the rest of the moveset, and also makes me have an issue trying to remember what button to press for this, and that. It just feels entirely weird. Like, it feels like a fraction of what one moveset should have, just spread across, like I said, three pretty much forms. It just feels awkward. It's still fun to play. It's still fun to do, especially for this DLC being like, I think like probably like an hour and a half, 2 hours long. That was originally a pre-order bonus for the OG version. It's freaking cool, although it's disappointing that it only has one unique enemy in it, and that enemy is incredibly underwhelming and pathetic. So there is that, but hey, something was originally a pre-order bonus, and in this version, it's clear for free. Unless you're playing the OG version that's still on PC, in which case it's like $5. But $5, I say that DLC is certainly worth that. Overall, I like the OG version, DmC Devil May Cry, and with this Definitive Edition, I definitely say it's better, but not by a wide margin, really. It's not that much of an upgrade. There are cool bonuses, like after you beat the game, you unlock Must Style mode, which means you can't damage enemies unless their combos at least in S rank, which isn't the hardest thing to do in this game, but it's a cool thing to try to add more stuff to it. That's a little turbo mode as well for this game. So try to add more and more to this version of the game in order to make him give him more incentive to play it, which, either way, which game usually goes cheap for $10, I'd say is definitely worth it. And I know many people still hate this game's guts because of how the developers and the fan base were so hostile toward each other. But when it comes to the game itself, I'd say it's just a damn fun game. I remember back in the day, people said, oh, this game would be better if it wasn't Devil May Cry, which I say, if this game was Devil May Cry, you wouldn't have given this game the time of day. Which is one of those I don't understand. People say this licensed game wouldn't be so hated if it wasn't part of this. Like, yeah, but at the same time, would you even cared about it if it wasn't? This game was not called Devil May Cry at all. Would people even get this game that time of day? They don't give me that. Ninja 3 made freaking that other game, I can't remember its name, Heavenly Blade. It's like, yeah, Heavenly Sword, like, yeah. Nobody puts up a Heavenly Sword, now do they? So that doesn't exactly put them on the map, now did it? So either way, I don't think this game is good. It's mostly for the gameplay. When it comes to regular mobs, boss fights, it kind of feel like I'm not using full potential of the moveset. And the DLC is pretty good considering the fact that the original is a bonus for the original release. So overall, this is a pretty cool game. I just wish that said more stuff was done with the human aspect in a game about trying to free humanity. And it feels like humanity is basically the most underutilized part of this game because Cat is supposed to fulfill the role of humanity, but I don't even feel like much is being done when Cat's already part of the Order, so you know what's going on. I'd rather see the average Joe people who are now being affected by these sweeping changes the Order are trying to do. Hell, we didn't even see what the Order even pretty much people even think of the Order. So it's based on how the demons portray them, which, well, again, might be interesting, at least have something to do with the human interaction in this game, especially when your main character is not human themselves. Like, come on, you could have done so much more with that aspect. Best potential. I see people say they want to sequel to this game, and honestly, yeah, better writing, sure, and the game does have potential, so yeah, gameplay is good and all that, although Ninja Theory is currently owned by Microsoft, so that's not gonna happen, at least not the same developers. But a sequel could work. People keep saying it as the Devil May Cry fans deserve a sequel to this game they don't like, and I'm like, sure, I'll take that sequel. Give me here, give me a sequel. I'll take it. Give me right here. Place it right to my hands. So that's what I gotta say about DmC Devil May Cry. All right.